Welcome to lesson 4.4. Bonjour les élèves, comment ça va? Ça va bien? Oui, mais oui. I know I'm a man of many talents. That is the extent of my French. Why did I start with a little bit of French? Because today we're going to take a look at the laws that revolve around the rights of our anglophones and our francophones here in Canada. Minority language groups is what we are going to be focusing on today. We'll be taking a look at Quebec, New Brunswick, and Alberta. So stick around and let's learn something. Bonjour les élèves. Bienvenue à la lesson 4.4. That's the extent of my French. I probably butchered it. If you do speak French, my apologies. But welcome to lesson 4.4. What collective rights do official language groups have under the Charter? And I'm speaking French, and you'll find out in just a minute or so. But before I tell you why, we are talking about the official language groups today. Let's take a look at what collective rights are. So we're going to step back to the very first lesson on what are collective rights. Collective rights are rights that are held by specific groups of people in Canada for historical and constitutional reasons. We've got our Aboriginal groups, which are made up from the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. And today's lesson, the reason I'm speaking French, the official language groups, our anglophones and our francophones. It may have been a while since you've heard of the terms anglophone and francophone, so we'll go over a few of the terms that are going to be said in this lesson. An anglophone is a person whose first language is English, and a francophone is a person whose first language is French. An official language minority is a group that speaks one of these two languages, French or English, but does not make up the majority of the population in the province or territory in which they live. So an example of an official language minority group here in Alberta would be francophones, the French speakers in our province. And the official language minority group in Quebec is going to be English-speaking citizens living in Quebec. Back in 2001, we have some data from 2001 of the languages that are spoken by the majority of Canadians in Canada. Here's the map that is going to represent that. The areas in red are going to be the English-speaking majority. The parts in blue, which is just Quebec, is going to be the French-speaking majority. And the part in green, which is none of it, is the Inuktitut-speaking majority. My apologies if I did not pronounce that correctly. However, there are only two official languages that are in Canada, and that is English and French. We do census. The Canadian government does a census every 5 years. And our last census back in 2021, the data has not yet been compiled. So the most recent data we have, I'm going to show you on this slide right now. This is the top 10 non-English mother tongues represented here in Alberta. This is the most recent data we have from 2016. Like I said, the data has not yet been compiled from the last census, so this is the most up-to-date. These are the top 10 non-English mother tongues that we have here in the province. As you look at this list, can you identify yourself on this list? I am going to say that a number of you can identify your mother tongue on this list. And this is in Alberta, and we can see this kind of falls in line with our recent immigrants as well. Immigration we're going to be talking about in the next chapter, but it's no surprise that in Alberta, for example, we have a large Filipino population that has arrived in the last few years. Therefore, Tagalog is going to make up one of the it's going to make the list of top 10, and in fact, it makes the list at number 1, followed by German, French, Punjabi, Cantonese, Spanish, and Mandarin, then Arabic, Urdu, and Vietnamese. And you know that many of you who are watching today's lesson can put yourselves on this chart. I'm showing this chart because of where French lands. French is not the top non-English mother tongue here in our province, yet francophones will have collective rights. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. So where do these rights come from? Where does all of this take place? And why is this what it is? Well, this dates back many years ago, all the way just a few years ago to 1608. We have our rights. Francophones have rights in Canada because of the roots that are part of Canada's past, all the way back to 1608, when Samuel de Champlain founds the city of Quebec, and now we have New France present here in North America. Years later, in 1774, and you remember this from grade 7 social studies as well, Britain passes the Quebec Act, and it recognizes those rights of the francophones. It recognizes their language, it recognizes their identity. Fast forward to 1867, when we have the BNA Act, the British North America Act establishes Canada as being a bilingual, bicultural nation. We have two languages and we have two cultures. Now, that's not necessarily the case right now in present day, but this is how Canada was established. In 1969, we have something called the Official Languages Act, and this reasserts that English and French are going to be the official languages of Canada, just like it was set out in the BNA Act of 1867. And then what we've been talking about for the last couple of chapters, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in 1982 confirms yet again the official bilingualism, and now we are starting to see language minority education rights. Sticking with 1982 and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, sections 16 to 20 establishes that English and French are the official languages of Canada, and you have the right to use those languages when dealing with the federal government. It also states that New Brunswick is the only officially bilingual province in Canada. You want to make a quick $20? I bet you, your parents, if you were to ask them, hey, mom, hey, dad, or grandma, grandpa, whoever it is that you live with, what is the only bilingual province in Canada? I bet that they would say Quebec, but it is not Quebec. New Brunswick is the only official bilingual province here in Canada. So what does this actually mean when we put this into practice? Well, it means that in Canada and New Brunswick, legally, you have to have English and French used in government. Legally, the laws that are published and any government document that is published in Canada at the federal level and in New Brunswick, both at the provincial level and federal level, has to be in both languages. And any government service at the federal level when you're dealing with Canada and at the provincial level when you're dealing with New Brunswick must be in both languages. The rest of Canada, the other provinces and territories, they get to choose based on their province or territory. And many provinces will approach the unilingual system, and they'll only offer documents and services in one language, the language of the majority. So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, here's a passport office. You can see that Passport Canada and Passport Canada, they are in both languages. The Government of Canada along the top as well, you have it in both languages. And then here are two pictures, the center picture and the one on the right. These are adult passport applications. The one in the middle picture is the English application, and the one on the right-hand side is the French application. That's at the federal level. That obviously makes sense. What about at the provincial level? Well, the top picture on the top left, this is a driver's license, a sample driver's license from New Brunswick. And you can see that it has both languages. It has English and it has French. Their license plate as well is both in English and in French. When you compare it to another province like Alberta that is officially not bilingual, well, Alberta's license and license plate only in English, the language of the majority. English and French both have equal status. They both have equal rights and privileges as to their use in all institutions of the Parliament and Government of Canada. That is the official language rights guaranteed to all Canadians. Now, what if you speak a language other than English? Unfortunately, you cannot get government services guaranteed in a language outside of French and English. It does exist, but it is not a guaranteed right. It is only a guaranteed right for English and French. Sticking with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, there's also a section in there, Section 23, which is the minority language educational rights. And that states that a minority population, so a language minority population of either French or English, of a sufficient size has the right to publicly funded schools that serve their language community. And what I mean by publicly funded schools is a school that is paid for and provided to the community, which is paid for by taxes. We're going to specifically look at Alberta, and we know from the history of our Métis, predominantly French speakers, who were also Catholic, moved their way west after Manitoba was created. After the Manitoba Act, we had the we had the rebellions that were taking place. They moved west into Saskatchewan and Alberta, and they settled in many of these communities that we can see here on the map. So fast forward to present day, and we're talking about francophone schools, and how does this actually work when it comes to language minorities? We have French language schools here in the province. Here in the city of Edmonton, we've got École Notre Dame, École Joseph Moreau, École Maurice Lavalle. There are so many schools here in Edmonton that belong to the Francophone School Board. And we even, at the University of Alberta, we even have the Faculté Saint-Jean, which everything is being done in French. These are the minority language education rights that exist. The Charter requires that provincial governments provide education to its citizens in the minority official language of the province where numbers warrant. And each province will have, they will make their own decision as to how many or how large this population needs to be to warrant language school for the minority language education rights holders. That is a mouthful. Where does all this come from? Well, we have our roots in bilingualism, and this is to protect those francophone and anglophone rights in Canada. This goes all the way back to the early days of North America and the days of when the colonies were developing here in North America. At the B&A Act of 1867, when Canada officially becomes a bicultural, bilingual nation, it's stated that French and English are going to be the official languages of government. And John A. Macdonald and George Etienne Cartier, who belonged to different parties, who had different backgrounds, they had to put their differences aside in order to protect that francophone and anglophone identity that was to exist. If they didn't put their differences aside, the Canadian landscape would look completely different today. And some will argue that maybe it wouldn't even look like a Canadian landscape. We might just be part of the United States, or a collection of individual countries or territories of the United States. So what Canada today would look like without the educational rights and the language rights of Canadians, the francophones and the anglophones, nobody knows. So education here in our province, specifically francophone education here in our province, before the Charter of Rights and Freedoms was introduced, if you wanted to attend, if you were francophone and you wanted to attend a French-speaking school, oftentimes you would have to go to a private school. But in 1982, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms came in. And a year after the introduction of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, francophone families used Section 23 within that charter to lobby the government for minority language educational rights. So this happened in 1983, at which point they launched a charter challenge to establish francophone school boards. Well, in 1984, francophone schools started kind of popping up in Edmonton and Calgary, but they weren't run by francophones. They were added to existing divisions here in the province. So Edmonton Catholic, for example, would run a francophone school, but Edmonton Catholic itself is not a francophone school board. But in 1990, the Supreme Court of Canada affirms that the right to francophone school boards does exist. And now today we have over 26 publicly funded francophone schools here in our province, as well as 7 school boards here in Alberta, which is a fantastic accomplishment for our francophone families. All right, we're going to switch gears a little bit. Now that we've talked about the educational rights that are given to official language minorities, I want to talk about and take a close look at something called Bill 101, also known as the Charter of the French Language. If you remember back from Chapter 3, we looked at the War Measures Act and where and when the War Measures Act was used. It was used during the World Wars against the Ukrainians and against Italian Canadians, but it was also used during the FLQ crisis. If you will remember, back in the 1950s and 1970s, not that you were around back then, but you remember from previous lessons, French nationalism was really gaining speed in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Part of the reason that this nationalism was growing was because English was becoming widely used within the province of Quebec, especially in Canada's second largest city, the city of Montreal. English in Montreal was known as the language of business, and if you wanted a good job, you needed to speak English. The lesser jobs were the only jobs that were available to French-speaking citizens. And another problem was that the signs within the businesses or of the businesses in Montreal often were in English. And this worried Quebec because people in Quebec felt that they were becoming more anglophone. And they were concerned, the francophones were concerned about losing their identity and losing their province or losing their language and identity within their own province of Quebec. So this whole idea of separatism, splitting from Canada, this idea began to grow, and we have the Parti Québécois, the separatist party, being formed, and now we have the FLQ crisis. And if you want to know more about the FLQ crisis, go back to previous lessons in Chapter 3, and you'll learn about the FLQ crisis. Nonetheless, René Lévesque, he wins the provincial government election in Quebec, and starts introducing this Bill 101, the Charter of the French Language. And its purpose is to promote and protect the French language within the province of Quebec. Now, this bill, the Bill 101, only is for Quebec, not the rest of the country. So Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, New Brunswick, and New Brunswick is a different case because they're officially bilingual. But what I'm trying to say is this law only applies to the province of Quebec. And it states that French-speaking people, they are a distinct people, and French is the language that expresses that identity and that distinctness and that uniqueness that exists only within Quebec. The people of Quebec, they wanted to, and they want to, make French the language of government. They also wanted to make French the everyday language of work, education, and business. So this Bill 101 is really pushing through. So much so that businesses, commercial businesses, would also have to change their signs. Now, before the charter, all commercial signs must be in French. But then after this charter, or after the charter, the Supreme Court says, yeah, okay, wait a second. We cannot prohibit English from appearing on these signs. But yes, you are more than in your right to require French to be there, and even more prominent than English. So after Bill 101 was introduced, there was a number of years of a leeway for businesses to start adding French to their name, changing their name, and things like that. So that was just a little bit of Bill 101. I just wanted to move there and just talk about life in Quebec because it is a very unique situation. Many of you who are watching this lesson today are immigrants, or your parents are immigrants, and you're watching this lesson because you are a student and you're wondering, hopefully you're wondering, what's school like in Quebec? What if I was a student in Quebec? What would I have to be doing, or what would be required of my family? Well, before the charter was introduced, francophone and immigrant parents who were in Quebec, they wanted English taught to their children at school. Now, I've got a map here. There's all the French-speaking countries in the world represented in this lovely purple shade. And we see North America, the Caribbean, South America, Europe, and many parts of Africa are French-speaking countries. And many are going to be moving to Canada or other parts, but I'm not just talking about the French-speaking countries that are here. I'm talking about any immigrant that makes their way to Canada, and specifically those that are moving to Quebec. The Supreme Court has decided, has ruled, and remember, once the Supreme Court rules, this is the absolute law. The Supreme Court has decided that francophone parents, so whose mother tongue is French, do not have the right in Quebec to educate their kids in English. If they want to educate their children in English, they have to send them to a private school, which means it's not publicly funded, and parents are going to have to pay a tuition. And a tuition at one of these private schools could be thousands upon thousands of dollars a year. The reason that the Supreme Court said this is because it violates the intent of Section 23 of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is included in the Charter to protect Francophone as a minority culture in Canada. If we allow Francophone parents in Quebec to educate their children in publicly funded English schools, that will eventually lead to the loss of the French culture and identity that we have here in Canada. This also extends to immigrant families as well. If you are an immigrant moving to Quebec, you must educate your children in a French-speaking school. That's just the law. That's the way it goes to promote and protect that Francophone culture that exists in Quebec. However, if you have children immigrating with you and those children have already received prior education in English, let's say you are from whatever country and you are in junior high and you're learning English in junior high and you move now to Montreal, well, you can continue your education in a publicly funded English school, which does exist in Quebec because there are a number of anglophones there. But if you didn't receive that prior education in English, you must then attend a francophone, French-speaking school in the province of Quebec. Now, again, this is only affecting the province of Quebec and not the other provinces and territories that we have here in Canada. We'll take a much closer look at this in the next chapter, in chapter 5, when we do talk about immigration. But for right now, what I want you to do is I want you to head over to your notebooks and complete the questions for this part of the chapter.